Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Master Your Life with Kate McKay. I am so grateful that you're here with me today. Today, I'm really excited about introducing a guest named Michael Kohan. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's so good to be here. The beginning is always the hardest for me. So the quicker we get into it, the better for me.
Right. And so it's almost like I don't even want to read your bio because it's almost like I just want you to tell me a little bit about you, but just to get us off started real quick. Michael is an I.C.F Certified Life Coach, and he wakes up every morning with the simple purpose to help others rediscover their powerful inner strengths and give clients and students the tools they need to make more meaningful decisions, to aim higher and elevate their lives. And that's his project that he actually established in 2015, which is the Elevate Life Project. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. You have a really deep background, obviously, and a big commitment to spiritual growth and understanding and the balance between the two. And I can't wait to dig in.
I try. I don't always succeed, but I'm always waking up every day asking myself, how can I be a better person? I mean, that's the essence of spirituality. It's who am I? How can I be a better person? And how can I leave the world better than I received it? And when we do that, we no longer are focused so much on what the world can give us and what we can possess, but rather look at the world as a gift, that the things that we have, the nice car that we drive, the nice house that we live in, as presents given to us to live our best lives. And that makes life a little less challenging.
Yes. And then, but to lead into that space, let's get right on into it. To lead into that higher space, there is a friggin' ton of challenges, right? I mean, you both of us as coaches, and you and I were talking about this before we hit play, which is like, I know I'm paid to push. And people with great influence in our culture, I think what happens is that we encourage and we think it's important to teach and to role model, but we don't understand that really growth, personal growth, professional growth happens in challenges. And that's both in having people around us that challenge us as coaches or whatever that may be, bosses, etc., even spouses, but also to understand that we need to push and challenge ourselves and our own limited belief systems. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about what is your journey into helping people disrupt false beliefs?
All right. So how do I begin here? Let's start with understanding that we as humans in this physical form have a physical body and a physical mind and a spiritual self. And most humans go through life living a material life looking for spirituality versus living a spiritual life in a material world. With that in mind, what does that mean? We have an idea that we are humans and that we're separate from the rest of the animal world. But as humans, we still are animals. And although we have the ability to think and to use logic, we still survive on that animal instinct, aka fight or flight. So when we look at the world, when we're living that material life, we look at things as, is this going to give me pleasure or is this going to give me pain? So we live in that state of how can I seek pleasure and avoid pain? And with that mindset, anytime that we have any sort of challenge or obstacle, we run away from it because we think that that's somehow wrong, that somehow that challenge that we're experiencing means that we're not living a good life. When we are coming to coaching and we're wanting to make changes in our life, we have to have a certain understanding that it's going to take what we call a tapasya, a burning desire, where we have to walk through the flames to shed out and burn off the areas of our lives that are no longer serving us as an ability to grow into a new version of who we want to be. And that growth causes us to change our identity, and that change of our identity, it results in a lot of hardship and struggle. We don't want to do that because we think there's something wrong with us when we have to do that. We think we're supposed to live this idyllic, peaceful, blissful life. And true success, true growth, true happiness does not exist unless we have some sort of pain to go through.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that. So true. Living in a material world, as Cyndi Lauper says, right? And this all sounds like good. Like we all get that. We hear that. We get it. And then yet we're in a world that and particularly if we're talking about America, where we're not used to the suffering. And I just listened to an interview with Lex Friedman. I mentioned that to you with Andrew Huberman. For those listening who have never tuned into Andrew Huberman, you must. He's an incredible neuroscientist from Stanford. But what he was talking about was Lex went into the battlefields of Ukraine and the most violent areas. And what he discovered is that the people's perception when everything is lost, homes and everything else, the most important quality, the center quality is the people around them. So and the center quality of choosing actually between love and hate. And that was just such an incredible mind shift for me to think about. And I think that in our culture of America, we haven't been challenged to have to be sacrificed. Think about COVID, okay? We were restricted in ways that we were not used to, and it flipped people out. Mental health issues went through the roof.
Still recovering. Large portion of my work is still helping people there.
And barely, when you look at the suicide rates of men in particular, middle-aged men, when men were isolated and lost identity. So we go back to that concept. But what is your sense on that? And understanding that challenge is the portal into your greatness. And how do you, as a coach and a leader, guide people through that process?
I'm going to answer it in a very roundabout way, touching on the Ukraine to the human condition, America, and then discussing the challenge that men are facing today. So let's start with an understanding of this. As humans, we are not the biggest species on this planet. We are actually one of the smallest and weakest on this planet. So we, by nature, are group-oriented individuals. We form collective groups in order to survive. Part of that collective is the desire to belong. And individuals who don't look like us, who don't think like us, we view as threats to our consciousness. So the question is, why do we first do bad things if our default nature is love? Okay. So in the 1950s, there was a book that came out called The Lord of the Flies that pretty much everybody in middle school in America reads. And the premises of the book was a critique on how we as humans treated each other during World War II. We committed great atrocities on all sides. The Americans, the Japanese, the Germans, the Russians. We committed horrible acts to each other. And the questions were, why could we do that and how? And we had this philosophy and this belief for the last 50 years that humans are only as good as the society, and society is held together by a threat. That was disproven. We are humans who form groups, and we will join groups to belong, and we do things horribly to each other in the name of the group. So although our default nature is love, compassion, guidance, whenever we have hardship and tragedy, like when I lived in New York City during 9/11, there were lines out the door to give blood, and people were letting people move into their homes, total strangers, because they didn't have a place to live because their home was destroyed downtown. And Ukraine, people who are being war-torn savages are coming together to help their neighbors survive. Love. So our default nature is love, but we ignore that when we want to belong because it's our default to survive. So we're in those two conflicts. So when I come across a client who wants to change, who has a challenge in their lives, we'll use the typical what's used. One of the clients usually come to me for one of a couple of reasons. They either want to advance in their career, make more money, or they want to either improve their relationships, they're struggling in their marriage or their partners or their kids, or they want to lose weight and feel better. So we'll use the default of exercise. And I'll have a client that comes to me and they'll be like, one of their goals will be to lose 20 pounds, get into shape. Their biggest problem isn't the desire to exercise. One of their biggest challenges is the group that they are a part of who does not support their desire to lose weight and exercise. Because if they do lose weight and exercise, then they change their status within the group, right? That hierarchy. There's someone at the top and there's someone at the bottom, and the rest of us are in the middle. So if you're in the middle or you're at the bottom of a group and you decide to change, the rest of the people around you are going to try to push you down in order for you not to change the status quo or leave the group if because your lifestyle changes. You want to go to the gym, you want to exercise, so you can't hang out on Friday night because if your favorite exercise class is Saturday morning, the group that you're a part of will start to take you down. They will attack you. They will criticize you. So we struggle because in order to make any changes in our lives, we have to change our group, and that's scary. And so we struggle with that duality or that idea that in order for me to go to the next level in life, I have to constantly change who I surround myself with. That's the biggest challenge I have with clients, along with them understanding that, and this can be a follow-up question afterwards, that in order to change their identity, they have to change their lifestyle. In order to change their lifestyle, they have to change their habits. So that can be the follow-up question there. The third part of the question, leading it to men, the biggest challenge men are having is they're being left behind. Men are really struggling these days. More and more studies are coming out that men are struggling because men are not succeeding in the modern world that we live in today. Men are, I think the latest statistic that I read was 2 out of 3 people that are going to college and graduating from college in America today are women. 3 out of 5 people in this world who are receiving postgraduate degrees are women. Men are not succeeding in the modern world. And because of that, they are struggling with that ability to grow and to overcome any challenges related to being part of the group. I'm a man. This is my role in the group, and I'm no longer the provider. I'm no longer the protector. So then I'm struggling. And so I don't know how to overcome those challenges. And that's where we as men need to learn and evolve and change how we look at this world and our role.
Right. I so agree. And it's my biggest work. I mean, as you and I also talked about, is like the suicide of my son in 2017 was a huge pivotal point. It was like, how do you transmute and transcend a loss like that and then find meaning after? And for me, what the revelation was, even though obviously my son had free will, that it was, I was here to advocate and help men claim that warrior in them, to reclaim it and to own it. Because in all truth, I believe that women have a responsibility to help men, because there has been a huge trend towards women parenting men instead of having them be equals and celebrating differences. Men are not supposed to be like women. Women are women, men are men. It's all good. But why is it in our culture that we encourage the style of communication that's only really geared towards the way women speak? So I have a big point about women need to let men be warriors. And that means women need to stop acting as though they're in control and they have to be like men in order to be successful. There's a lot of pushback on that. It's because I'm older and I can have these conversations. I have an athletic background. I have 5 brothers. I'm used to a gym full of men, and I find men easy to talk to. I don't find them complicated. And I know a lot of women are like, oh my gosh, nothing irritates me more, Michael, than hearing people bash men. And that is in our media. That's on TV. That's in our culture, even with women hanging out together. Oh, men, they're all the same. That infuriates me.
Well, I think we can kind of look at it from a psychological and social standing. The biggest danger to any society historically is out of work, uneducated men. They're the most destructive. It's been historically throughout the history of the world, when men are out of work and they don't have a purpose in life.
And they're not getting laid. They're not getting laid.
Well, that's the second caveat. That's where a lot of these studies are coming out, and it's a big challenge in heterosexual relationships. Women aren't attracted to men who are at the same level. So if a woman has a college degree, she's typically not attracted to a man that doesn't have a college degree. And if a woman has a higher advanced degree, like a PhD or an MBA or a law degree, they're typically not attracted to people that aren't on the same caliber. It is a big problem in society on both sexes that we really don't know right now how to address it, because men don't date up and women don't date down in terms of status.
Did everyone hear that? Say that again.
Men don't date up. Men don't date women that are more successful from them. Typically, it's a huge issue. This is not my opinion. This
No,
is all
100%.
the studies coming out in the journals. And this is a major challenge, because if women are becoming more and more educated and more successful, which God bless them, they have every right and they should, men have to change the way they look at the world, and so do women. We have to be able to understand that just because a man isn't making as much money as a woman or isn't as educated or vice versa, that they don't have the same value. We have to understand that in this modern world, value isn't necessarily on what we are able to provide, but who we are as a person and how we can support people. Yes, by nature, I consider myself a man. I don't consider that toxic. I am proud to be a man. As a man, I like to get shit done. Sorry for my language. I like to go out. I like to solve problems. I like to help people solve problems. If there's a light bulb that it needs to be changed, I like to do that. My wife wants to change it. That's okay. But I like to be the guy that does that. That's what it means to me to be a man. That doesn't mean I have to be toxic about it. I don't have to mansplain. I don't have to treat women as less than, or I don't have to talk over them. And I don't have to sit there if someone comes up to me as a woman and says, here's my situation, and for me to mansplain and talk over her, I can look at her and acknowledge and listen as a modern man and as an equal, vice versa, the same thing. Just because I, as a man, might not be as educated as you are, or doesn't mean that I don't have the same value as you. Mm-hmm. We have to begin to shift a lot of these judgments that we have, these expectations that we're going through. This is a different period in time in history. Prior to the revolutionary or the Industrial Revolution, most success was based on how big you are and how strong you are. When the Industrial Revolution happened, most success was based on your ability to retain information. We are no longer in that age. We are in a new age, the age of information. So the need to retain information is no longer a skill set. It's the ability to take information and discern it and be able to interpret what is true and not true in an age of over information. And we have to then begin to shift what our roles in this world are between men and women, and what it means to be a man without being toxic, and what it means to be a woman without being toxic.
100%.
We don't have to change roles.
Right. We hear about toxic masculinity, but there is such a thing as toxic femininity. I'm here to proclaim it because
women can be successful. Women can be lawyers, doctors, leaders, and presidents of the United States and still be women. Women don't need to be successful and be men. That's a different conversation. But if a woman wants to be masculine, I'm not going to judge her. It just means you have to find a different partner if you're heterosexual. It's the idea of the yin and the yang. It's the idea of the feminine and the masculine. In spirituality, there always is these two energies. There's a ha and a tha. There's a yin and there's a yang. There's a light and the dark. You need both to create oneness or wholeness. So if you are, as an individual, a woman that's a little bit more masculine, a little bit more like I go out and get shit done, then you probably will want to be with a man that's a little bit more feminine, so that you're not competing energetically. And that's a concept that we are struggling with, because a lot of times women don't like men that are the opposite. They're not attracted to it. And so they stay single because they can't find a guy that is aligned with them properly. And vice versa. A lot of times men are a little bit softer now, like playing video games and reading books that are a little bit more emotional. And we have to understand that that's shifting, and that doesn't mean that you're less than.
100%. I think we're in that evolution. I think that's why I'm so excited to be actually have clients younger. I find my curiosity is much more geared towards learning from the generation that's rising, because I believe that they are looking at things differently, and their level and just tapping in now, if you don't mind, let's move on to the whole concept of spirituality. I believe that the younger generation came into the world with the deeper awareness of consciousness and higher mind. So you could ask a younger person, what does consciousness mean to you? And they'll give you like a very Buddhist, quite beautiful perspective. It's not complicated. Where if you talk about, God or, things from an older generation, it's a little bit more complicated. It's a little more geared towards maybe biblical metaphor or whatever else, right?
Imperialism.
Yeah, pretty much. So I just find it far more, it lights me up. And realizing that a lot of that is not God is somewhere, God is here. And that's really what being present, and whether we're looking at any philosophy, God is love, and here we are in it every day. Heaven is on earth if we're living our life as spiritual beings in a physical body, as a material body, as you mentioned. So I'm just curious from a personal level, what has been your journey to your spiritual awakenedness? Have you gotten your copy of Claim Your Inner Warrior? It is my newest book, available now on Amazon. The book is directly geared towards men and the women who love them. Grab your copy today.
So I was born Jewish and Christian. Growing up, I had both a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah. So I had both so I studied both Judaism and Christianity growing up as a kid. And I was always taught just to question what it means to be, what religion meant to me. Let's start with the difference between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is asking the question. Back to the original conversation we had at the beginning of the show, spirituality is asking the question of who am I, what is God, and am I living a life aligned with God? Religion is the path to find those answers. Religion is not evil. Religion is not bad. Religion is a guide. Why more and more people, and especially younger people, are more identifying themselves as spiritual rather than religious is because more and more the world has become more of a collective, right?
100%.
20, 30, 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, when I grew up in the 90s, I grew up in a very homogenous neighborhood. Everybody, 90% of the people in my town were white, 80% of them were Christian, 10% were Jewish. A couple of people were of other religions, but we didn't really know about it. So I was part of my tribe. I lived with my tribe. I grew up with my tribe. I went to school with my tribe. I graduated high school with my tribe. And then I went off to college and I went to Penn State, and we were still very much tribal, right? All my friends in college were Jewish, except for one who was not. We hung out at the Jewish fraternity, and then we hung out at my fraternity, where half the people in my fraternity were Jewish, still very homogenous. Then the internet came, and then social media. And some of the great things that came out of social media was the beginning of being able to share and see how other people of other faiths, other backgrounds, other religions coexist. And then we began to move together more. Now, 25 years later, the world is very different. My next door neighbor might be Arabic or Muslim. The person across the street from me is Christian. The other person across the street from me is Buddhist. My boss is a Buddhist. My best friend is Hindu. So I can't follow the doctrines of imperial religion anymore, where I am told that unless you believe in this particular faith, you're going to hell. How can I do that when my next door neighbor, my best friend, my exactly. Sister who married somebody of another religion, are they going to hell because they don't believe in what I believe in? So that's why more and more people are becoming spiritual, non-religious. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be religious anymore. It means that the doctrines of religion need to be more accepting of other people's faith, because religion gives us the answers. Religion helps us understand what that means. But this goes back to the original conversation I had before. Part of that understanding that religion gives us the answers is we have to, as modern people, begin to evaluate and discern what that means without looking at anybody else as a threat. So when I am told that I explore a certain religion, that's the answers that are right for me without me looking at anybody else and saying they're bad because they don't believe in what I believe in. They're not the enemy. They're following a path of that's right for them, and I have to be okay with that. And that's what it means to be spiritual while practicing a faith. And I think that's where we should evolve to versus throwing all these great spiritual teachings out the door as somehow bad. They're not bad. It's the idea of imperialistic religion that makes it bad. It's the idea that unless you're part of my group, once again, you're the enemy. And that goes across all aspects. And that's what we're seeing a lot more of. That's why we're seeing all this hatred, right? Like we can look at America as a perfect example. It's like I'm either part of the blue team or I'm part of the red team. And if you're not part of my team, you're the enemy destroying my society.
100%. That's
right?
the ultimate in creating duality, which is hatred. Only thing that grows in duality is hatred. You know, it's like us against them. It's toxic tribalism in a way, right?
Great word.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Great
words.
word.
Yeah.
And so I came, and then to follow up to finish the question, when I came across the idea of spirituality is when I was 32 years old, I was a closeted drug addict who, this is before they had restrictions, where I was having prescriptions filled, by 4 different doctors for Percocets, Xanax, Adderall, and Vicodin without any no one cared. And I was taking these things all day, every day. And a friend of mine said, you're going to kill yourself if you keep on this path. And so I got into yoga. And when I started studying yoga, it led for me to begin to study the idea of what it means to live a harmonious life.
It's beautiful. So what would you say to someone? Because it's pretty shocking to think that you, with all your success, was living that life, right? What would you say to that person that's listening or viewing this podcast if they're living in that darker place? And what was your journey into the dark, out the other side? What would you tell them? What hopeful words or lesson?
I got very lucky with a very good mentor who very much guided me through a very dark period of my life. On paper, you would have never known. I was making almost $250,000, $300,000 a year in New York City. I had a great apartment. I was in good shape. I had good friends. I had a nice job and a great apartment overlooking the park. My life was great on paper. I was not happy on the inside, and I masked it, drugs. And the only reason why I'm alive is because I had money and I had really good health insurance, and I was able to, and I had access to various doctors before there was any sort of regulation who gave me prescriptions to drugs. So I wasn't buying crap on the street that would kill me. Very lucky for that. And I started going to yoga. And then every time I went to a yoga class, I started to feel a little better. Yeah.
So just a question for you in regards to the yoga practice. Do you ever feel that deep sadness and tears and that? Because I get some serious emotional release in my class. I remember tears streaming down my face.
I never cried. I'm a guy and I'm in a class with a bunch of women, so I'm not going to cry. My sort of change came when I was taking yoga, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. This is before a lot of the scandals that came out of yoga. This was before Instagram, and this is before yoga became very mainstream. And so the great yoga teachers, that's like the second generation yoga teachers, these were the people I studied with and practiced with. So I got to study yoga with Sharon Gannon, Geisha Michael Roach. I got to study with Pattabhi Jois before Pattabhi Jois's scandal, the laundry list of great yoga teachers who studied a lot of this, a lot of the great wisdom. Now we can talk about what happened, and a lot of the scandals came out because all they were trying to do is promote the light, the goodness, and they weren't looking at their dark. My big change were, you asked me how I went through this pain and came out the other end came when I was about 32, 33 years old. And I was coming out of a yoga class, and it was this teacher, her name was Sharon Gannon. And there was a Q&A afterwards where people were asking her questions. She was a huge yoga teacher at the time. And this one student sitting next to me asked Sharon, like, basically was like, well, you have the life that I want. You're surrounded by people that support you. You have friends that support you. You seem to be living the life that is meant for me. And I'm living in a life that I'm not happy with. I have a marriage that I'm struggling with. I have a job that I don't like. What do you do? And how did you make this life for yourself? And Sharon basically answered this question. And this is what began to change my life. Sharon said, you're not happy right now. That's okay. And if you want to change, you're not going to be happy either, because change is painful, and that's okay also. But both where you're at now and change is only temporary, and it will one day end. And so if you want to, you can work really hard, and you can be willing to change and go through a lot of pain. And one day you'll get to a place where you actually will find happiness, because everything in this world is temporary, including where you are right now. So you might as well decide to make change and grow, because then you might get lucky and get to that place. And that changed my life. I literally was like, oh my God, you mean I'm not my problems and I'm not this pain? I don't have to sit here every day and be miserable anymore. That even though I'm sad and angry and depressed and just lost and an empty shell on the inside, I don't have to be here anymore. That if I go on this journey, I'll still feel like this. But if I keep going, maybe I'll find a place where I'll actually find love again. That's what changed. And that was how I was able to push through when there were periods of loneliness where the friends I was around, I couldn't see anymore because I was doing drugs with them. And so I had to give up friends, and I had to stop hanging out with other friends because they were drinking too much. And there was a big period of loneliness. I gave up my job, so I didn't have any money for a long period of time. I was broke. And I kept reminding myself that I keep going. If I keep going and keep doing the work, if I don't give up, I'll find that place where I feel good again. And that's what I tell everybody. It might take you the rest of your life. It might take you many lifetimes, but you'll get there if you don't give up. Success in anything is guaranteed as long as you don't give up.
Beautiful. Well, it goes back to the Christian tenet of just having that mustard seed of faith, of hope, that there's a possibility that through the pinhole of grace is the light. So yeah, that's really beautiful. And so if you were to tell, if someone was to ask you like, man, I'm in a dark spot, it would be just to keep going. And is it like, not to sound like corny, but let's just say if you had a billboard in Times Square, since you're from New York, what would you want that, if it was like Michael Kohan this is what he said, this is the quote.
Don't be afraid of the dark.
What?
Don't be afraid of the dark. That's where growth happens, right? That's the essence of yoga. The essence of spirituality is to run towards the dark and bring light to it, not to run away from it and only look for the beauty and the peace and the bliss, right? When we run away from that pain, that darkness, then we suffer, right? Suffering is a choice, right? Pain's part of life. We live in a material world, right? What is the absolute truth of this world, right? We don't have to pay taxes. If we don't pay taxes, we either get our money seized by the government or we go to jail, right? We don't have to work. If we don't work, we lose our home. What is the one thing we have to do? The only thing that we have to do in this world is die. Everyone in this world is going to die. The illusion of this world, the one true illusion, is the idea that we know that we are one day going to die, but we live our life like it's not going to happen to us, right? We think, and because of that, everything in this world is going to change. Everything is going to end. The house that you live in is one day not going to exist. Your car is not going to exist. Your body's not going to exist. You will not exist. And that's okay. With that causes pain, because change is painful. And that pain, that change is everything that is dark, everything about you that you don't like, everything that when you look in the mirror and you see that person looking back at you and you see things about you that you don't like, and you don't like parts of your life, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not something to overcome. It's to look at those things in our lives and go, okay, I don't like these things about me. Sometimes that can be overwhelming. We don't want to focus on it, right? Because that's what happens. It's like we look at that dark, and then we just fixate on it. We just focus on it. We think something's wrong with us because when we go on social media, when we go on the TV, when we look at the news, all we do is see either the world is ending or someone is having a better life than we are and something's wrong with us. So we either cling to that darkness or we run away from that darkness. We have to look at both the dark and the light in this world as one. We're both. And we look at the dark in our world as our teacher to be better, to look at those things that we don't like about ourselves. Maybe you're struggling with money. Maybe you're struggling with an emotional imbalance and you're going through some problems, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. Those are your teachers, even though you don't feel like they are. Right? Maybe you have a death in the family or a sickness. So that's part of human conditioning. We want to look at that as our teacher to move forward. And then we want to look at the things in our lives that we have that are good, because you have good in your life too, not as something that is as a place where we want to live, but we live there with gratitude, because we know that we live there with gratitude because one day that's going to be taken away also. When we cling to only the good, then we also suffer, because that's going to be taken away, right? Your house, your car, your health will be taken away. It's going to happen. So we look at the things that we have in this world with gratitude, joy, the things that we like about our life with gratitude as gifts. And we look at the things that we don't like about our lives as opportunities for growth. And that's how we are able to move forward. And then we no longer suffer. We no longer have this inability to grow, to change, because we know everything changes that.
So good. Preaching it,
Trying.
MK. dropping my little blue mic here. Boom, boom. Oh, that's so good, dude. It's so awesome. I freaking love it. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being the light and being transparent on your struggle and explaining me what may seem to be complicated material in really simple and beautiful ways, so that people can say, man, I can breathe into that. And maybe there's a possibility that I can move into that space too, with that same level of faith in the unknowingness. It is the unknowingness, but ultimately knowing that in the end, everything is going to be okay.
Yeah. When I heard that message, like, it's okay that you're in a dark place. Nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Like, don't be ashamed. I was like, wait, what? I mean, I remember like when I just started coaching and someone interviewed me on a podcast about drugs and alcohol addiction. Everybody around me was like, what are you doing on that show? No one knew. I kept it completely secret. No one knew that I had vials of pills hidden. I was functioning. I had a job. I was exercising. I was going to the gym. I was just in a lot of pain. And that pain was not like, I didn't have any hardship. I didn't go through any sort of challenges. I wasn't molested. I didn't have bad parents. I didn't have, any sort of tragedy. I just was lost. I wasn't me. And I just felt very trapped. And I just felt very empty inside. And I didn't have to have big tragedy to experience that. A lot of times we dismiss our pain because we didn't experience some major life altering event, right? Sometimes when we have pain, we dismiss it because we think that, who am I to suffer? I'm white, male, American, or I'm the privileged person with good parents and a nice background. I shouldn't have these hardships that I'm going through. Something's wrong with me. And it's like, that's not the case.
It's not. It's such a good point. It's so true. And it's not always like that everything, your lessons have to come through big trauma. And that's another part of the duality conversation is right. Like, I bring up my son, not to say my life is worse than yours, but to be the light, to say that we can overcome and move into the darkest places. And not that I'm denying the darkness. I went all the way through, but just the sheer fact that I moved through grief with enthusiasm, which just means in the divine, by the way, that word. Yes, I did. I moved into the dark and then into the light. I didn't miss a drop. So, yeah. I mean, and I say that with like full transparency, that not to say it was ugly. And here I am interviewing you, MK. It's a pretty good thing.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here. I love doing these things. I love podcasting. I love listening to other stories. And I love your story of how, you've embraced your struggle, your sadness, and made it your purpose. You brought it, you didn't ignore it. You brought it to, to the front of how you help others.
It's the way, I believe that when we lose someone we love, and this is what I would love the listeners and the viewers to understand, is that when you do lose someone, or something that meant something very deeply to you, when that person passes, they no longer need the gifts that you loved about them so much, the qualities. They don't need them in the other realm. So my son was by far the most kindest and gentle humans I've ever met. He just was very kind and very gentle. So those qualities, I used to be way more type A anxious girl. So now I'm able to wear those qualities like a shroud, right? I can wear those qualities and honor him by representing him on the plane. And I think that that's true for anyone. Make the choice to honor those people, and they don't want to see you suffering, and nor do, really your highest and best self doesn't want that. So I just want to leave that with the audience and viewers.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. And I hope we shed some light on some people in this world and gave some knowledge. So that's the purpose. That's why I'm here.
It sure is. And I'll be sure to share all of your contact information in the show notes. So if anyone wants more information in regards to Michael, just check that out. And again, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Master Your Life. I'm Kate McKay. And until next time, run to your darkness, because on the other side is the light. Have a beautiful day. Want to learn more about Kate? Check out our website at kate-mckay.com.